Chaos among Democrats, unity among Republicans. The wildly spinning world of politics. The Point starts right now. The Republicans emerged unified from the convention in Milwaukee. Former Congressman and New York gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin is here to talk about what it means for the nation and New York. Congressman, thank you so much for being with us. I wonder, this new unity that the Republicans are showing, is this something you think the party can maintain through November?
We have to, with the goal of being able to save this country. There is a cause that unites us. Coming into Milwaukee, the stakes were raised even higher after last Saturday's attempted assassination of President Trump. The party is strong, and it became stronger over the course of the convention when some of President Trump's top rivals from the primary, Ambassador Nikki Haley, Governor Ron DeSantis, both spoke, as well as others. So I feel like this party is stronger today than any point that I can remember, and it's something that is going to be important to not just maintain, but to continue to grow upon as we move forward in an effort to reach out to undecided Democrats and independent voters who are willing to vote and listen to Republican messages and Republican candidates, maybe for the first time ever in their lives.
Well, so, that leads me to the next question. There has been an effort during the convention to change Donald Trump's image, to make him look more of a unifier. And his own speech, he talks about unifying the country. Do you think this is going to work to bring in more independent voters, more suburban women, people who might not have looked at the Republican Party before?
Yes, undoubtedly. And President Trump had something happen to him in his life last weekend that makes you reflect on a lot, makes you think deeply about certain aspects of life and the stakes and the path forward in a way that maybe when he woke up last Saturday, they weren't as much top of mind, and where he has throughout this past week inspired many others through his fight and his courage and his bravery, not just last Saturday, but since. I think will send a tremendous message to anyone who's listening. But for these voters you speak of, they have specific substantive issues that are important to them and their family. They care about having a stronger border, economic prosperity, energy independence, whether it's fighting crime or having a better foreign policy. You ask these voters what are most important to you, and they have issues that they want to hear where Republicans stand and where Democrats stand. And throughout this past week's convention, there's been a substantive discussion on what conservative solutions are to these challenges to make quality of life better inside of our cities, in states, regardless of whether it's a red state or a blue state, or for our country, which is certainly at a crossroads.
The Democrats are trying to very hopefully to flip the House and take control of the lower house. They've eyed 5 Republican freshman seats in New York. I wonder now, given all that's changed here, do you think that the 5 Republicans they're aiming at are as vulnerable now as the Democrats thought they might be?
Democrats have to outline, just like Republicans have to outline to their supporters, their donors, their voters, their volunteers, what their path is to the majority. And for these battleground seats in New York, some are held by Republicans, others are held by Democrats. It is going to be a battleground here in this state to decide control of the House of Representatives. That is still a reality today, just like it's been at every point since November of 2022. These Republican incumbents in districts that Joe Biden won in 2020 are now facing a different political reality, a different political earth underneath them. Districts that Joe Biden had won in 2020 are now polling with President Trump up. In some of these districts where you have Republican incumbents now, they're no longer challengers. They are now incumbents. They are able to spend the last 2 years being able to make relationships with their new constituents. And it's something that they continue to focus on doing a good job. They can be even better and stronger in the polls come this November. I think that Allison Esposito in the 18th Congressional District of New York has a great chance in her race against Pat Ryan. I think Mike LePetri on Long Island facing a difficult race against Tom Suozzi for sure in New York 3, but there's a path to victory there in a district where we've seen a number of Republican upsets in recent years and where we performed very well at the top of the ticket in 2022. So to answer your question directly and as succinctly as possible, New York absolutely is going to be a battleground in November.
So here's my question. Does the quotient change, the vulnerability quotient change if President Biden does decide to step aside and there's a different person at the top of the Democratic presidential ticket?
No, the fact is that inside of New York, in these suburban districts, President Trump is polling up. And there's no indication that if President Biden was not the nominee and it was Kamala Harris as the nominee, that President Trump wouldn't be up anymore. I haven't seen any type of data or anecdotal information to confirm that Kamala Harris would be performing better than Joe Biden in these battleground suburban districts, not just outside of New York City, but there's also a competitive district that is in the Syracuse media market upstate. These are tough races. The Democratic registration is something that is in the favor of the Democratic Party, but these Republican incumbents have been working hard to define themselves, to be independent, and as their goal might have been to try to outperform whoever would be the top of the ticket, not knowing that President Trump would be the nominee when they first came into office in January of 2023. Now I think the top of the ticket is even stronger than they might have anticipated back then.
So my next question is this. Some people have expressed concern about a trend towards isolationism on the part of the Republican Party. You know, less support for NATO, no aid to the Ukraine. I wonder if you think that the American image abroad will suffer if President Trump is reelected as president.
Well, we need a strong NATO. And to have a strong NATO, all of our NATO partners should all be fulfilling their commitments to NATO. And if any one country inside of NATO is disproportionately carrying a heavier burden, that lack of investment by our partners is something that, in my opinion, actually weakens NATO. As it relates to Ukraine, the funding, and a lot of funding, that's been sent to Ukraine over the course of these last couple of years needs to come with accountability. And there are Americans who want to know how their dollars are being spent. An effort by a member of Congress, let's say inside of a committee hearing, to ask for accountability on how dollars are being spent and accounted for shouldn't be met with some type of an attack as if they're committing treason to ask these questions. It is their job. Whenever foreign aid is being sent anywhere in the world, it is the duty of those in government, whether you're in Congress or in the executive branch, to make sure that that money is being spent wisely and as effectively as possible. Also, whenever we are engaged in any foreign conflict to any extent anywhere in the world, it's important that we are defining what winning is. What are our goals with engagement? And right now we are heavily engaged in Ukraine. It is important to let the American people know, what does victory look like? What is the end game? What is the timeline for the goal of being able to achieve it? Because what we don't want to do is ending up with a never-ending conflict that we are invested in overseas, to the extent that our own resources to protect ourselves becomes depleted and we are unprepared because we got into something without clear enough objectives to achieve from the get-go. So during this presidential race, I think it's an important question to ask, is what is your goal for a conflict in Ukraine? What is your goal for the conflict between Israel and Hamas? What is your goal as it relates to North Korea and Iran and China and Russia? Foreign policy is on the ballot, just like so many other issues that are so important for Americans. But I think asking these questions as a representative, whether you're a senator and now a senator who's the nominee for vice president, or you're any other member of Congress, I, as an American and as a taxpayer, would hope that everybody would be making these, asking these questions and making these demands as far as defining what victory is.
Lee Zeldin, thank you so very much for joining me. We're going to have to leave it right there for now. Next up, a rising star in the City Council. Brooklyn Councilmember Ossé joins me now, and we're going to talk about presidential politics. You were one of the early people to say that Joe Biden should step aside. How do you feel about it now that there's been this inertia in the Democratic Party? What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. So ever since I saw his performance in the debate, I got a bit worried. Listen, I'm a staunch Democrat. I want to see Democrats beat Trump in November. In order for us to do that, we need a nominee and a candidate running on Democratic values that's able to pull out a staunch difference between what the Democrats are offering versus what Trump is offering. Biden has not proven to be that candidate over the past couple of weeks. I think he's done great work around climate, around infrastructure. But we need a nominee who's able to speak about those wins. And I do not believe that in his current state, especially with everything that's been going on for the past couple of weeks, that he's the individual that will be able to beat Donald Trump.
Well, there's a big issue here in New York because Hakeem Jeffries, the minority leader in the House, had hoped to flip some of the Republican congressional seats and help flip control of the House. Do you think that Joe Biden at the top of the ticket will make it more difficult for him to score any victories in New York?
I think it would make it more difficult if Biden was at the top of the ticket. If you look at some of the polling across the country in House races, and especially in some of the Senate races, we're seeing that Democrats are pulling ahead in these battleground states against Republican candidates. Democratic values are something that this country wants to see, whether it's women's rights, climate justice, fair taxes on the wealthy. And in order for us to pull through past the finish line and secure victories from the presidential level down to the Senate and the House, we need a new nominee at the top of the ticket.
So if the new nominee is Kamala Harris, do you think that she'll make a big difference in terms of making inroads with people who might have been giving the Republicans a second look?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've also seen polling gone out over the past couple of weeks about how Democrats and voters would be more inclined to vote in a younger candidate to be the Democratic or the next president of the United States. Kamala is polling better than President Joe Biden is currently. I think that she's able to speak amazingly about the values of the Democratic Party and the platform that we have. If she was given the reins, I totally believe that she could pull it off and beat Donald Trump in November.
So this is a loaded question, but do you have a candidate you'd like to see run with her that you think would be a good running mate for her?
I think that's a really good question. Maybe Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania. I think Pennsylvania is going to be a hard state to win, like it always is. And I think just balancing that with the ticket, with her at the helm, could be a good look for the Democratic Party.
So there's a little bit of a problem that the council has right now. A council member from your home borough of Brooklyn, Susan Zwang, was arrested at a housing demonstration allegedly for biting a police officer. What do you think the council should do about it?
Well, I think the council should wait on whatever the investigation yields. I know that the Brooklyn District Attorney, Eric Gonzalez, is going to definitely evaluate the case. I think any type of violence in a situation like this should be taken seriously. We should let the justice system play out, and based off of whatever the results are there, I think the council should take this seriously, especially if there is a charge that is made against her.
So you introduced a really big bill in the council so that tenants wouldn't have to pay broker fees. It's been a little controversial because the landlords don't really like it. Why is the bill so important, and why are the landlords so against it?
So the bill's called the FAIR Act, and what the bill is trying to do is, first, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. In every other state in this country and every other major city in this country except for New York City, whoever hires a broker when looking for housing, whether landlord or tenant, pays the broker fee. This bill would do just that, right? In every other industry, if you hire something, you order something, the person who does that would pay for it.
So if the tenant decides to hire a broker, they
would pay the broker fee.
And if the landlord hires a broker, they pay the broker.
Exactly. And 9 times out of 10, when you're a tenant looking for an apartment in New York City, you find an apartment on your own, sometimes word of mouth, even in the own building that you live in, and you're trying to move into a different unit.
And you shouldn't have to pay a broker fee.
And you're forced to pay a broker fee, even though you never hired the broker. So this bill would change that. It's common sense. We have a majority of co-sponsors in the city council on it, a dozen labor unions, dozens of advocacy groups, and I really believe that we'll get it past the finish line.
So let me ask you this question. I know you're interested in housing. President Biden unveiled a new housing plan this week that would cap the maximum rent increases to 5%, or the landlord, these are buildings that where you own 50 units or more, the landlord would then lose tax breaks if they didn't do it. Good idea, bad idea? What effect would it have in New York?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea. And I think the specific term that he's using here is that it would be addressed to corporate landlords, right? This is basically federal rent stabilization. I think it's an excellent plan. I hope that he can get it passed or through prior to the election in November. I think this could be a huge win for Democrats in New York and for the entire population of the United States of America, but I think this is an excellent proposal from the president.
But landlords in New York are not happy about this. They argue that their costs keep going up. It's not only electricity, but the cost of operating their buildings, wages for their employees. Is it a legitimate argument, or do you think they're just sort of wanting to get more profit?
I think landlords are, especially corporate landlords, are always trying to maximize profit. Of course, they would be against something like this. You know, I think that we've seen costs stabilize since the pandemic, and I hear that corporate landlords are still talking about the supply chain, which I think is a little silly at this point. But we need to keep people in their homes. It's good for the economy. It's good for the safety of our streets, and I think this is another excellent proposal from the Biden administration.
So the assassination attempt on former President Trump seems to be indicative of a low regard that some people have about politicians in general. I'm sure it's not limited to him. I wonder if you yourself have ever received any threatening phone calls, any threats, other members of the city council. And then the second part of the question is, what should we be able to do to lower the temperature and convince people that politicians are trying to do something for you?
Sure, yeah, I definitely have received some threats in my time in office.
Did that surprise you?
It did not. I mean, I understood some of the dangers when first running. I think it was scary, the first threat that I received, and I take all of them seriously. There are a lot of news publications that incite that type of violence onto elected officials. For example, the New York Post really, every time there's an article there, it definitely prompts some threats for me and some of my colleagues. Should there be more
protections for city council members? Police protection or law enforcement?
I think before getting there and using city resources and taxpayer dollars on that type of protection, I just hope that we can improve the culture that is existent in our country right now. Political violence is never the answer, no matter where you lie in the political spectrum. And I think all of us as Americans, as members of the media, should be very cognizant of that, because we need to uphold our democracy's values, and violence is not one of the values within our democracy.
So we have about 15 seconds left. Would you want police protection if you got threats?
I think it depends on the level of violence there. I would potentially look into private security. I do want to reduce the amount of violence or money that is spent on private security for elected officials.
We'll have to leave it right there for now, but our conversations continues right after the show on CBS News New York. Thank you for joining me. It's the question that chattering classes are obsessed with. Should Joe Biden be the Democratic presidential nominee? And what do New Yorkers think about potential replacements? They're weighing in on your point. Do you know who Gavin Newsom is?
No, I'm sorry.
No.
Who?
Gavin Newsom.
No. I have no idea.
Who, what?
Who Gavin Newsom is.
I don't.
I have no idea who that is.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Yes, I do.
What do you know about Gavin Newsom?
I know that isn't he the governor of California?
Would you vote for him for president?
I don't know enough about him.
Probably not. I don't even know who he is.
I don't know enough about him to know if I would or not.
If he was my only choice, sure.
Would you vote for him for president?
Yes.
Why?
The last debate.
I would. 100%.
Why?
Because I like what he's done, and I think that Biden needs to back down and allow him to move in. I'm going to vote Democrat, so if he's the candidate.
Well, if he was the Democratic nominee.
I might.
How about Gretchen Whitmer? Do you know who she is?
Yes.
No.
No.
I don't know who that is.
I actually don't.
I don't know who that is.
I know a little bit about her. I know she's from Michigan. I know there was some bad business with her being like attacked, or someone tried to attack her.
Would you vote for her for president?
Not without knowing.
Over her and Biden? Yes.
Well, she's a woman, so yeah.
I would want to spend more time learning about them.
Depends on what she offers.
If it came to that.
Whoever the Dems put on the ticket.
So should the Democrats stick with Joe Biden as their candidate for president?
Oh, definitely not.
No. I'm glad I don't have to be the one to answer that question, honestly.
I think maybe not.
No.
Because?
He's too old.
I'm going to leave it to greater pundits than I to answer that.
I think he's old, and I think it's time for him to back down like he always said he would.
He's not vibrant enough. He's not robust enough. He's not sharp enough.
Biden to me he's like an old war soldier. He's not. He doesn't have it in him left to run another term.
I also think our government right now is in a difficult place, so I think Trump or Biden shouldn't be leading our country.
If he's still running the country and he's still able to, I would guess so.
Should the Democrats stick with Joe Biden as their nominee?
Yes.
Because?
Because the polls have shown that there isn't as much damage as we all feared. In fact, I've heard he's ahead in 2 of the swing states, so there's hope. It's not all hopeless. He could be the comeback kid. That's what I'm hoping.